Students, today we're going to work through a question from the Cambridge paper from November 2016, paper 3-2, question 1. This is for the Seagulls Boating Club. Now, what I've done is I've set out the bits and pieces that you need to complete on the side here. Obviously, in an exam, sadly, you are not given any framework, but it's very easy to set this out for yourself. This particular question requires you to do them piece by piece. It's quite nice because even though it's all for the same club, it's chopped up into different chunks. So you can do A on its own and then B on its own, etc. However, sometimes you'll be given a question where you actually need to complete all the different parts pretty much at the same time. And then it is quite nice to lay everything out beforehand so that you are able to jump between them. Right, so let's have a look at what we need to do here. The Seagulls Boating Club is a small, not-for-profit organization which generates income from members' subscriptions and a cafe. Now, I know very often you're tempted to just jump past that first sentence and ignore it because you think it's just going to waste your time. And yes, I suppose they didn't give you any dates or markups or anything important, but actually they did. They're telling you where the main income comes from. Firstly, it's member subscriptions, and secondly, from a cafe. That immediately gives you a clue that you might need to do a trading account for the cafe and a subscriptions account for members, which is in fact the case. But otherwise, at least, it's setting the scene. You know you're dealing with a boating club. You know they've got a cafe for members to sit and eat, and you'll need to see if you make a profit or a loss. And obviously, you'll also work out for member subscriptions. The first question is just a theory to introduce you to the concepts and see if you can remember the basics. State two differences between the financial statements of a not-for-profit organization and those of a limited company. Basically, what this is asking you for is what are the differences between if you are working on a normal for-profit business versus a not-for-profit organization such as a club or society. Don't get confused by the fact that they refer to a limited company. If you're already happy and comfortable with all your company theory, by all means be specific and refer to a company. But if you haven't yet covered that, don't stress. Just understand that if they're talking about a not-for-profit organization, the direct comparison is usually for-profit. So let's think about the different things. Remember that the main difference is that your terminology changes. Your terminology for a not-for-profit organization can't really talk about making a profit. So instead of having an income statement or a profit and loss account, you would have a statement of income and expenditure or an income and expenditure account for an NPO rather than an income statement or statement of income for a company or any profit business. That's the first difference that is very obvious. The second one that we can look at is the fact that our terminology in that statement of income changes. A club or a society, in other words, a non-profit organization, instead of referring to a profit or loss, is going to refer to a surplus or a deficit, versus a company will refer to a profit or a loss. And then the last obvious thing is that your non-profit organization has as its equity an accumulated fund because they don't have capital going in, whereas a profit business will have capital. If you're going to be specific and refer to a limited company, you could actually speak about your share or your equity capital. But in fact, to get your marks for this question, they would accept just capital. So those are three main things that you can refer to. You only need any two of them. But when you're giving your answer, do make sure that you put both parts of it, what it is for a non-profit organization and what it is for a company. Don't just put half of it. Otherwise, you're not explaining the difference very well. Remember, state two differences means you've got to show both parts of it. Right, let's move on to the next part. You can see we're given some additional information, points 1, 2, and 3, and then we are required to prepare the cafe trading account for the year ended 31st of March 2016. What I would suggest is either in the information or in required or even both, highlight that date for yourself because it's quite important to remember that if that date is whatever that date is, so that you know what time frame you are dealing with. And when you look, for example, here at the balances, you can see that 1st of April 2015 is the beginning and 31st of March 2016 is the end. It's very important to get this time frame correct. So we need to do the trading account for the club. In other words, we are going to look mostly at our sales and our cost of sales. So if you wanted to, you could actually put in sales, cost of sales. You could then think and say, well, what do I do in my cost of sales? And we'll usually indent it a little bit. You don't have to, but it just helps you to see that this is part of your workings. You might start with your opening stock or your stock on the 1st of April 2015, because we know our date. You would then have your purchases that you're going to put in. You might have some other bits and pieces that you could add in, and then you would have your closing stock, which would be your 31st of March 2016 figure. If you just say closing stock, that's fine, or you could say stock at 31st of March. You don't necessarily need to show both of them. I'm just doing it to make it a little bit clearer for you to understand where the information is coming from. That would then give you your gross profit. Now, do you see what I'm doing? I'm doing the basic layout so that I don't have to think too hard. I'm thinking about it now, and then as I get the information, I can pop it in as I need to. It's very easy on a blank sheet of paper as well. And you can see here I've left a space. Maybe I don't need it. Nobody's going to penalize you for having an extra line here or there. It just helps to have the framework set out for you. So let's have a look. The following information is available for the cafe for the year ended 31 March 2016. Number one, the cafe takings were $25,750 and $8,850 was paid to suppliers. Now, cafe takings, that would be your sales, 25750. Now, I'm inclined to always put my numbers in brackets over here rather than as a final answer, because you never know. They might tell you something about selling stuff on credit, or that something was paid to you later and wasn't included. It's very easy to transfer an amount across. It's not so easy to put your answer in and then go cross it out and rework it. So I like to do my workings over here, and I only fill in my final columns once I'm done. It tells me 8850 was paid to suppliers. So that is going to be part of my purchases. And if they don't give me any more information, I could assume that that was just cash purchases. Although in reality, you wouldn't know it yet because you haven't seen it, but they do give me balances owed to suppliers at beginning and end. So what I would actually do when I get to that point is do a little rough T account for accounts payable on the side somewhere. This is just a rough T account. It does not have to be neat and pretty, but it will help you to see what's going on. And that amount that is paid, if you think of your accounts payable, it's a liability account. In other words, it would decrease on your debit is going to be a minus, okay? And it would increase on the credit side like that. Oh, sorry, it's not sitting there nicely where I want it to. No, it's not going to do that for me. I'll just have to run along all the way like that. Sorry, sometimes Word works like I like and sometimes it doesn't. So on the credit side, now what has it done? Okay, well anyway, on the credit side, it's a plus. Now, what I always like to do is I actually like to, forgive the fact it's not looking as pretty as I would like, you don't need to write in your debit and credit. It's always obviously assumed that the left is the debit and the right is the credit. What I do like to do if I'm not 100% sure is remember that this is a liability account, so it's a minus plus. Then I don't have to think very hard. So I would buy stuff and put it on the credit side, and when I pay my suppliers on the debit side, this would be my bank entry over here. So I can put in bank and my amount of 8850 on the debit side. Why is it doing that? Let's put it back there. And let's see if it'll let me. Yes, it will. Okay, there we go. That looks much better. And now we can move on to the next part of it. Number 2, an assistant received monthly wages of $600. On the 31st of March, the assistant also received a bonus of 10% of the annual cafe takings. Now, wages is not usually considered part of trading activities. However, because these are wages specifically for the cafe, and we are trying to work out if the cafe made a profit or not, we would actually show my wages over here, and I would need to subtract them. So if you wanted to, you could actually say less wages, but as long as you show your answer in brackets to show that it's going to be minus, or as long as you just minus it, you'll be okay. Now we need to work it out. Notice here that it says monthly wages of 600. So that means that it's going to be 600 times 12. In other words, 7,200 will be part of your wages. And then you need to add on the bonus of 10% of the annual cafe takings. Now you need to go back and see what were your takings. Over here, your total sales, the 25750, is what you will use. And you'll say times 10%, which is going to give you 2570. Don't worry, you don't need to show as many workings as I've got over here. If I were doing this in an exam, I would simply use my calculator, or my head hopefully, to work this out, and I would write 7,200 plus 2570, and then I would put my answer in at the end. So my answer would be 9770, like that. I've just shown the detailed calculations so that you can see exactly what I've done. Right. They also then tell me that the following balances were available. Inventory at the beginning and the end. That's quite easy. Hopefully you realize that's your opening and closing stock. So we will put them in over here. Opening stock of 3875. Closing stock, remember you always need to subtract, because if you've still got it on hand, it means that you have not sold it. And therefore it's not part of your costs. So we'll subtract that. Then we are told that the cafe trade payables are 2831 and 2952 as the balances owed to my suppliers. Now this is why I'm going to need my accounts payable account, and probably it's only at this point that I would start drawing it up. Remember that it's a liability, so it's going to have balances on the credit side. So at the beginning, my balance brought down is going to be 3875. Sorry, that should be in black. Okay. And then at the end, my balance at the very end is going to be a balance brought down of 2952. What this means is that I'm actually able to now go and work out what is the missing figure in this account. Because over here, this line where I am right now, that I'm going to write in, is going to show me what I bought. So this would be all my purchases on credit. So your contra account could be your purchases of your inventory, and you'll work that out as the missing figure. So this is where you take your calculator and you'd say, well, if I've got that at the end, I paid that amount, but that's what I owed at the beginning, then what is the difference? And what you'd end up doing is you'd actually say, well, obviously if I paid, that would have been some of that's bought on credit. But if I owed this at the beginning, then not all of that 8850 related to this year. So you'd need to subtract the 3875 that was owed at the beginning, but then you would need to add on the amount that I owed at the end that I have not yet paid. If you are more comfortable with it, you could actually work out this T account by completing it properly and putting your totals and everything in. I quite like to just do it like this, although quite honestly I do also usually put in a little line. Let me do this so that you can see what I'm doing. My borders, I want a nice fat border, and I'm just going to do that across over there so that I can see where my end is. And that thick line is representing my totals, which I have not shown, but if you wanted to, you could show the totals. And it's also hiding the fact that you would have underneath bank, you would actually say balance carry down to make up part of the totals. When I'm in a hurry, like to just do it as simply as that. Right, so now we've used all the information that's given. All that is left is to put it all in. Now, yes, I know I maybe wasted my time putting sales in the brackets first, but at least I'm sure of what I'm doing. My purchases, I can add everything up, and I will see that I get 8971, hopefully. I've now got an empty line. That's okay. Can you think of what might go in there? It might be things like the carriage on those purchases, carriage inwards. If you were importing stuff, it would go in there, although that is unlikely for a club, but you never know. At least I've left space. I don't need it, but that doesn't matter. So now I can work out my total cost of sales by adding all of those up. I would obviously want to put a little line underneath here to show that that's where my total is. And while I'm busy doing my lines, I might as well also do my lines over here for gross profit. And here, let's actually make it a little bit thicker so that you guys can see it, because otherwise you're going to miss it completely. You're going to put a line across there and here like that. So my cost of sales that I work out should at the end of the day come to 9423, and I show that in brackets, so the 9 didn't go in. I showed in brackets so that I know that I need to subtract it. Also, if you wanted to at the beginning here, you could actually say less. It's just whatever you're most comfortable with. And then I can work out my gross profit. The gross profit should come to 16327. But I've still got to worry about the wages, and you can see that the wages actually makes quite a big difference to how profitable this is, but without that assistant you wouldn't be able to sell anything, so that's not a major problem. 6552 is the profit for the year that you are busy working out, but now because and we can call it a profit because this is the trading activities of the club. Remember, normally we would talk about a surplus. So you can here say profit for the year, or you could say surplus. It's not really a problem. And that's how you do number B. Right, let's go on and have a look at C. For number C, you need to do the subscriptions account. It says, prepare the subscriptions account for the year ended 31st of March. So it's the same period of time, which is what we would expect. I've done a nice little ledger account here. Obviously, when you're doing it on your plain foolscap piece of paper, all that you need to do is, I always like to draw the line across the top and a line down the middle. The details for my dates and folios and amount, you just put them in and you just write your way across and it's fine. As long as you've got this middle line down the middle, that's really all that's important. You probably could even leave that out, but then I would just get very confused. Right, so additional information. The club has 310 members who pay an annual subscription of $80. Now, if they've got 310 members who are supposed to pay $80 each, that means that I should have in my income and expenditure account the amount of these two numbers multiplied. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to leave my top line free because generally we would know that I'm going to have a balance at the beginning, and because it's subscriptions, we could have it on both sides, because we would have on the one side for the members who have already paid, this would be 2015 April the 1st, okay. These are the people who still owe me money from last year on this side because they were owing. So they're like debtors, and that's why we put these on the debit side. So that's a balance brought down. And on the other side, also at the beginning of the year, and although you don't need to be too worried about dates here, I always like to be a little bit careful with them. It does generally help. This on the credit side would represent the guys that you owe money to because it's a credit. And those are the people who've already paid you for this year in advance. So I leave that top line free, or you can fill in as I've done for now. And then we'll go on and look at what's actually happening for the year. My dates now are going to be for May the 31st, sorry, March the 31st. And now I can put in on this side, remember that the subscriptions account, it's kind of like a blend of well, it is an income account. It's very definitely an income account. In other words, an equity. And remember, equity goes minus plus, just like your liabilities. So the minus side is what you would decrease and the plus side is what you would increase. But it also is a type of blend between your receivables and payables, because you can see here you've got receivables and here you've got payables, and it works in exactly the same way. But that's fine because you can see receivables you would expect to have on the debit side and payables on the credit side. Anyway, so if this is an income account that we're going to record the money that we get in on the credit side, when we close it off, Normally we would close off to an income statement, but here, remember, we'll close it off to the income and expenditure account. We do it on the debit side to close it off. So we will write in here income and expenditure. Don't worry if you run out of space, just go down onto the next line. In fact, let me do that for you here. Obviously, if you're working by hand, you don't have Word making more space for you, so you do it like that. Do not, whatever you do, do not abbreviate, because you won't necessarily get marked if things are abbreviated. So it's very important that you do write in full, but don't be scared to go over a couple of lines. You'd probably do this in the general journal if you were getting careful with your folios. And let's just show our workings in here so that you can see what I'm doing. 310 members times $80 each. There's my dollar sign. And that's going to give me my amount that I need of $24,800. That is the amount that I'm expecting to have as my income. The following information was available for member subscriptions. We've got our beginning members and our end members. Now, interestingly here, what they've done is they've given us the number of members instead of telling us the amount. Sometimes they'll tell us how much is owed, but here they've been a little bit sneaky, and it's fine. All we have to do is just every single calculation is going to be times 80. So at the beginning, if 4 members paid in advance, those are the guys that I owe money or membership to. So it's on the credit side over here. And I would say 4 times 80, which is going to be 320. And let me just put this in here for you. 4 members times $80, just in case you don't understand what I've done. And subscriptions in arrears at the beginning, that means that they owe me. That would be over here, 9 members times the $80. Sometimes they could get a little tricky and say that membership changed and last year it was 70 instead of 80 or something. Just means that your calculation there would be slightly different. But that really would be being a little bit mean, but it is possible to do that. So you just do a little multiplication. Sorry, I'm not adding very nicely in my head today. 720 is the amount that you would need on the debit side over there. We can now put in our end balances. You can see they've told us at the end how many are owing. So this would actually be a balance carry down. And what I would do is I'm just putting in my spaces here. These are my carry downs. I will leave space for my totals. I'm going to quickly put my nice little borders in so that I can see what I'm doing. That's where I'm going to put the totals, and I don't know it yet, but that's okay. Do you see, I'm very comfortable filling things in when they're not actually complete. And this would then be April the 1st when I say balance brought down, and you'll see in a minute why I'm doing below the line first. Because now it's very easy to see where these need to go, because this is going to be the guys that owe me money because it's on the debit side, and this is the guys that I owe money to because it's on the credit side. So subscriptions in advance are the people who've already paid. There are 3 of them, so that will be 3 members times $80. In other words, 240 again. Just happens to be the same. Oh no, sorry, we didn't use 240 before. I'm talking nonsense. But it's 240, 3 times 80. And on this side over here, it's going to be the 12 members who are in arrears. Now, if you have a look at this, they could also ask you a question like, should we really be worried about these members? And if you look at how many there are compared to the total membership, it's not too bad. However, it has increased slightly, and you could factor that into your discussion if you wanted to, but it's not really of too much concern. So over here, you've got 960 still owing. Once you've got these in at the bottom, it's very easy now to go up and do the rest. So obviously that 960 would have been carried down on the credit side, because remember that was filling in a missing space here. So I always like to work up like that. And my debit carried down is going to be 240. Now that I've got that, I can see very clearly that I've got something missing over here. And that would be my bank figure from my cash book. And that is what I would have to work out because I don't know it. So let's highlight it in a nice bright green. And you can see that's what I'm working out as my missing figure. All I do is I add these up, and I see that my totals should be 25760. Which means I can go backwards and work out by saying 25760 minus the 960 minus 320, and we can see that my bank figure should be 24480. And that's now my subscriptions account completed. I've just filled in the gaps from the missing information, kind of like when you were doing your incomplete accounts. It's a very similar technique to what you do over there. I do hope that makes sense. Let's now go and have a look at what we need to do for the last part of this question. They've given us some more additional information. The following information is also available for the year ended 31st of March 2016, and as one would expect, it is the same date as the previous questions, but do watch out. Every so often something changes, so do read that. And let's quickly look at what's required before we go and use the information. Prepare the income and expenditure account for the year ended 31st of March 2016. Now, if you think about it, we've already done a couple of things that involved income and expenditure. Do you remember? Let's go back and have a look. Obviously, number A was just a theory question. But the trading account, that showed us what the cafe profit was for the period. So this 6552 does need to go into my income and expenditure account. In the same way, this figure over here from my subscriptions, 24,800, also needs to go into income and expenditure because, hello, it tells us right there. Now you have a look and see, well, which one is more important to this club? Obviously, subscriptions is where they get most of their income, so we'll generally put that amount in first. So the first line will be for subscriptions, and you just, oops, sorry, I've gone a line up too far. I'm putting it where the headings should be. Subscriptions, that is going to be my amount that I've used from the subscriptions account, 24,800. Make sure that you can see where that one comes from. And then I'm also going to use my profit from the cafe. Hang on. Sorry. Cafe. Did you know you can do this on a Mac? It's so cute. Cafe profit. And the amount there is straight from the top from my cafe account, 6552. And that gives me my general total income that I've got, which if you wanted to, you could actually do a little subtotal over here, which I'm going to do. And we'll see that so far the income that we have to play with is 31352. And then we need to worry about all of our expenses. So now we can go back and have a look at the information that's given. But we have already used what's above. It's very easy to forget about these bits. And if you don't take them into account, if you forget that these are actually all interlinked, then you are going to end up losing marks. And it's quite a pity. So it is really important to be able to take both of those figures down. General expenses of 2,500 were incurred, which included a paid insurance invoice for the period from the 1st of March 2016 to the 31st of May 2016 for $180. So that means that my general expenses are going to be a little bit different to what I have got over here. Now this is where I could write here, you could actually say less expenses. You don't have to, but I always like to have little headings to see what I'm doing. And then I'm going to just indent it again so that I can see what my expenses were. In this case, my general expenses. And I'm going to show in brackets what I'm doing. The first figure of $2,500 that I need. But the fact that it includes insurance for this period means that although I want to use March, I do not want to use April and May. So I'm going to have to subtract 2 months worth. In other words, 180 times 2 over 3 months, because the 180 is for 3 months and I need to take 2 of them out, which would be 120. Then we might need to add other things on. We'll wait and see. For number 2, fixtures and fittings were required on the 1st of April 2013 at a cost of $16,000 and are depreciated at 25% using the reducing balance method. So obviously we will need to pop depreciation in here, But we'll need to get clever and work out the depreciation, in fact, from when we bought it initially, because if we're using the reducing balance method, it would change over time. The way that I like to do this is to use a little table. Now, obviously, you don't need to draw the columns, but since I'm doing it here, it's going to be easier. So you need one column for your dates, one for your depreciation, and one for your carrying value. So the first year end, if I bought it on the 1st of April 2013, it means my first year end will be the 31st of March 2014. And you can see that I'm abbreviating my dates because I'm doing this very quickly in an exam. I don't want to waste time. Now, my first depreciation for the year would be 16,000 times 25%. I'm going to show you the calculation, although I wouldn't actually write it in an exam. I would just work it out. But 16,000 times 25% means it's 4,000, which means that my carrying value at the end is then going to be 12,000. And I need to know that because the next financial year, which is then the 31st of the 3rd of 15, in other words, the beginning of the current financial year, I would have now said 12,000. I'm using that carrying value at the end times 25%, which would give me 3,000, which means that my carrying value at the end of that period is now going to be 9,000. Let's just show here 12,000 minus 3,000 equals 9,000. And up here what I did was I said 16,000 minus 4,000, just in case you're getting a little bit confused. As I say, if I was doing this myself, I wouldn't show those workings. I would just show my numbers here and I would show those numbers there. Just keeps it nice and simple. Then I need to show for my current period, well, in fact, you don't even have to put this in the table, but I'm going to put it in because it might help you to see what we're doing. Exactly the same methodology. I would now say 9,000, which is my last carrying value that was given, times 25%, which is going to be 2,250. It doesn't even matter what the carrying value is, but out of interest, it would be your 9,000 minus 2,250, which would give you 6,750. You would only need this if you were doing a statement of financial position, as that would then show the value of that furniture and fittings. But the important thing right now is this little block over here. So let's shade it in nicely. That's what we are trying to work out, and what we're going to bring up over here as my depreciation for the period, the 2,250. That's how it got worked out. Right, there's no other information, so we can now go and work out my general general expenses amount, which would be 2,380, and in fact I would normally put these in this column here because then I'd use them that column for adding. So let's quickly take that out, just trying to make it look all pretty, of course. Then using my table design, my borders, I'm going to paint in little totals like this. If I add my expenses together, my total expenses that I'm going to have to subtract, which is why I'm showing them in brackets, are going to be 4,630. You can see that's just these two expense amounts added together, and that will give me a net effect of 26,722. Now, this is where you need to be careful. You can't call it a profit. You have to call it a surplus for the year. Or if it was in minus, you could call it a deficit, or you could say surplus over expenditure, anything like that. But just make sure that it is called a surplus. You don't need to bold it, but I've just bolded it so that you can remember that that's what you need to do slightly differently. And you have now finished the question almost. The last thing you need to do is let's have a look at E. Okay. Additional information. The Treasurer currently maintains the records using a manual bookkeeping system and is now considering transferring the records to a computerized accounting system. So we're getting a little bit more interesting here. Recommend to the Treasurer whether or not he should introduce a computerized accounting system. Justify your answer, analyzing both the benefits and the limitations to the club. This question, make sure that you do answer it completely. The first thing is you need to recommend yes or no. And very often it doesn't actually matter what your answer is, as long as you've backed it up correctly and come to a sensible decision based on what you've put for your benefits and limitations. So you need to make a valid recommendation that will give you one of your 9 marks, and then you need to justify it by giving both benefits and limitations. And in fact, in this question, they've awarded 4 marks for benefits. 4 benefits need to be listed and 4 limitations need to be listed. You can give a few more if you wanted to, just to make sure you're okay, but it is important that you balance it with both of them. And the marking memo actually says maximum 4 for each. So that's really what you need to do. So the first thing is you come to a decision. Personally, I would say this is a good idea, but you could, if you wanted to, say not a good idea. It depends on what you argue later on. You would then discuss all the benefits, and the benefits could be things like the fact that it's a small business and generally your cost of purchasing is not going to be that high because you'll only need a small package or a cheap package, as it is a small organization, a small NPO. And although you can get very large and complex, very expensive packages, it's very easy to get small packages for, in South Africa, just a couple of £1,000 and use those. Your cost saving would actually continue over time. You're not going to only have a benefit from it once. It's going to be a continuous benefit that you're going to have. It's going to save a lot of time, because when you're working on a computerized system, the computer will do a lot of the calculations for you and the posting and all of the nitty-gritty things that, yes, for example, a bank reconciliation, you will still need to do the bank recon. It adds for you and it highlights things that haven't yet been ticked off for you. So it just makes it a little bit easier. This means that you can then use your time better on other aspects of the club. In other words, how to go sailing in this case. You can also use it for other things, such as if you've got employees, you've got somebody working in your little cafe. So you could do the payroll, you can do invoicing to members, etc. It can all be a little bit easier. You can integrate the system into other aspects of the club as well. So things like letting people register online or pay subscriptions online, etc. It does make it a little bit easier. Sorry, my spelling is atrocious, I see today. It's also going to reduce your storage space because you don't need to keep all the paper. Although you do need to back up, which we'll get to just now in the limitations. But it does mean that all those files that you would normally have, you don't need to. And for me, that's always a wonderful advantage. It's going to use less paper as a result, which is linked very much with the storage, and paper takes a lot of space. There's reduced manual input because it just is much faster to enter the information. I personally find it faster to type. And also because there's less manual input, the computer is actually, or the computer package, I should say, is doing the processing for you. There's less room for error. That doesn't mean that errors will not occur. You can always have some silly person who's inputting incorrect things, but it does mean that you're not usually going to have as many errors as if you were doing it manually. Generally, you then don't need as many staff, so you might have reduced staff costs. Although as we come to the limitations, sometimes then they feel a bit worried about their jobs. But it just means that if you've got somebody who is planning to retire, you can let them retire and somebody else can take over the whole thing because it is much easier. You can also use IT to advertise the club, to gain new members, etc. And that can be linked to your package, which brings me also to the fact that your package could be tailor-made specifically for the club, which would help it do exactly what you want it to do. And you can also use password restrictions so that only certain people can access data. When you're using manual accounting records, anybody can actually open it up, but that's not the case if you are using a computerized system. So you can see there's a whole lot of benefits here, way more than you need. But just talk about them. Obviously, please don't just write time saving, explain. I've written short, rough notes so that I don't bore you by typing it out in full. Have a look at the actual given memo on this sheet over here. All the memo answers are given there for you as it is in the marking guidelines. So you can go and look at exactly how you would want to put it. But make sure that you use proper full sentences and you explain your points very carefully. Right, the limitations. Obviously, there is an initial cost, although, as we pointed out, it's not going to be ongoing. You just buy it, and then you can carry on using it for a number of years until you need to update it. But you will need to then regularly update the software, the technology, etc. You've got to be careful that your computer could crash. Now, if you are careful and you're using updated computers and updated software and proper antivirus software, etc., you can reduce those risks. But you've got to keep in mind that what do you do if it does crash? And that's where I would always say, make sure that you back up your information properly. But that does take a little bit of time. Again, make sure you've got proper backups. But you can also back up directly into the cloud. These days, a lot of the computer accounting software packages automatically do cloud backups. So that would solve the problem for you. You would have to spend some time and possibly money training your staff, so that could be problematic. You will need greater security of where you've got your passwords, etc., to make sure that not everybody can get onto it, because you've got the risk of fraud and data loss, and that's why you would need to have increased security. It also will be very expensive to maintain and repair if something does go wrong. It's very easy to just buy another book if your book gets finished or scruffy. To buy a new computer is obviously going to be more costly. Your workers might be resistant to change. They don't like something new. They don't want to have to learn new things. And they might also fear that they're going to lose their job. So fear of job losses is something else. And it's very important to have happy staff. If your staff aren't happy, any business, or in this case your club, is not going to operate as efficiently as you would like. And along with all those other risks, obviously there's the risks of data being hacked or stolen. So those are all the things that you need to keep in mind. Now, it depends in your argument how you've actually argued these, and you come up with your own way of arguing and your own decision of whether or not it's a good idea, and that will give you the end of your marks. I do hope this has been useful to you. If you have any questions, please do pose them to me. Thank you.